is every PS Vita ever made. Since its launch in 2011, the PlayStation Vita had tons of potential, but nowadays, it's known as one of the biggest mistakes the PlayStation ever made. But I gotta ask, was the PS Vita actually a failure? It's no secret that I loved the PSP. As Sony's first foray into the handheld market, it was the underdog that dared to challenge Nintendo's iron grip on portable gaming with the Game Boy and later the DS. While it didn't quite dethrone the handheld king, the PSP carved out its own passionate fan base and left a real mark as the console for hardcore gamers. However, a looming threat was already on the horizon. By 2008, the world was evolving quickly. Apple had just released the first iPhone and later the App Store, and Google were preparing to launch Android, both of which were a new and arguably more convenient way of playing on the go without needing a dedicated handheld. So when it came time to develop the sequel to the beloved PSP, the PlayStation team had to make a crucial decision. Would they build a true successor, or should they lean into something entirely new to compete with the upcoming smartphones? In the end, they chose to hedge their bets and do both. The Sony Xperia Play, aka the PlayStation phone, brought an almost PSP Go-like form factor with slide-out physical controls paired with a full-fledged Android phone. It ran PS1 games along with some exclusive titles, like bringing Minecraft to mobile for the first time. Funny, I feel like that game's got some potential. You know, here's the thing. I did a video on the Xperia Play when it came out, and I remember trying Minecraft on mobile. I'm like, wow, you can play this Minecraft game on an Android phone? Whoa, that's crazy. What will technology bring next? Minecraft still looks the same, actually. I don't think it's the same. Meanwhile, the core PlayStation team stayed the course to build the true successor to the PSP. Excitement for the next generation was quickly reaching a fever pitch. After years of speculation, in January of 2011, Sony was finally ready to show their hand. At a press conference in Tokyo, then CEO Kaz Hirai took the stage to unveil what they were calling the Next Generation Portable, or NGP. The reveal was met with excitement and a fair bit of skepticism. Sony was promising a device that could deliver near PS3 quality graphics in the palm of your hand, a claim that seemed a little too good to be true.
But they're able to really enjoy that particular console for a very long time.
That's definitely true, just maybe not the way he thought. To underscore just how serious they were about the NGP, Sony brought in some serious talent to spearhead its development, Mark Cerny. While you might know him today as the lead architect behind the PlayStation 4 and 5, Cerny is one of the godfathers of the gaming industry. He cut his teeth at Atari and Sega, breathed life into Crash Bandicoot and Naughty Dog, and helped shape franchises such as Ratchet & Clank as well as Jak and Daxter. At the heart of the NGP, which of course was basically identical to the final shipping PS Vita, was a custom-designed system on a chip that pushed the boundaries of mobile gaming hardware at the time. With a quad-core ARM-based CPU and beefy PowerVR GPU, there was a lot of power on tap. Memory was also a strong point for the Vita. It boasted 512 megabytes of RAM and an additional 128 megabytes of VRAM, which was a massive upgrade over the PSP's mere 32 megabytes. The centerpiece of the Vita's hardware was its stunning 5-inch OLED display. With a resolution of 960 by 544, it delivered vibrant colors and deep blacks that really made games pop and absolutely embarrassed the mediocre display on the 3DS. It was also a capacitive touchscreen, meaning no need for a stylus, and in a unique twist, the Vita also featured a rear touchpad, which was neat if not very often used by most games. For connectivity, the Vita included Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and uniquely optional full 3G cellular. It won't be a surprise to learn that this was not a commonly chosen option, and it got phased out of the Vita lineup pretty quickly. Then there were the quality of life upgrades, such as dual front and rear facing cameras, and dual analog sticks that finally had arrived. Honestly, it's probably the biggest single upgrade for the PSP in my opinion, especially when it comes to shooting games. Trying to use the little tiny PSP nubbin and nothing else, it's not fun. I mean, technically you use the D-pad, but like, no, that was not it. Compared to its main competitor, the 3DS, the Vita was packing some serious firepower. In raw performance, it was estimated to be about 2 to 3 times more powerful than the 3DS, and that was with Sony being conservative. Engineers could have pushed it much farther, but they were worried about 2 things: heat and battery life. Quote, well, it's not going to run at 2 gigahertz like the PS3 because the battery would last 5 minutes and would probably set fire to your pants. according to an engineer who probably got in trouble for saying that. But it was true. Even with this more conservative route, the Vita was still head and shoulders ahead of the competition. To demonstrate the console's capabilities, Sony showcased a portable version of their hit franchise, Uncharted. The game, later titled Uncharted Golden Abyss, looked remarkably close to its PS3 counterparts. It was a clear statement. Good luck running a PS3 quality game on your wimpy smartphone. Angry Birds? How about angry that you ain't got that Vita energy, boy? This is the Vita sign, right?
No gang signs, please.
No, you're right. No access, no gang signs. Alex, can I have any fun ever? Jeez. However, the reveal wasn't without its concerns. The impressive tech specs led many to worry about the potential price point and, of course, battery life. Sony remained tight-lipped on these details, leading to speculation that the device might be prohibitively expensive. Just imagine Sony releasing an ambitious and incredibly expensive console. Like, they would never, ever do something like that. Oh yeah. At E3 2011, they officially rebranded the NGP as the PlayStation Vita. Vita meaning life in Latin. The name was chosen to emphasize Sony's vision of the device as an integral part of a gamer's lifestyle. Although, and maybe it's just me, it feels so out of place in the history of PlayStation. We've got PS1, PS2, PS3, PSP, Vita, PS4, PS5, like, it just doesn't roll off the tongue. As the Vita's late 2011 launch date approached, anticipation continued to build, but Sony were facing big challenges. The devastating earthquake and tsunami in March of 2011 had disrupted supply chains across Japan. And of course, the massive security breach of the PlayStation Network in April of 2011 had damaged Sony's reputation and probably diverted some resources away from the Vita's development.
Real greatness, it's what you do with the hand you dealt.
Despite these setbacks, Sony pushed forward, determining to deliver on their promises of the next generation of handheld gaming. The stage was well and truly set. The PlayStation Vita's launch was a moment of both triumph and probably a lot of stress for Sony. After years of development and hype, the Vita finally hit store shelves in Japan on December 17, 2011. The initial response seemed promising. Over 300,000 units sold in the first week alone. It was a solid start, outpacing the launch of its predecessor, the PSP. But the real test came with the global launch in February of 2012. In North America, the Vita sold more than 200,000 units in its first month. Now, on paper, these numbers looked really good, but the reality was more complex. The Vita was entering a very different market than the PSP did. Thankfully, the launch lineup was pretty solid, boasting 26 titles that showcased the device's capabilities. Games like Uncharted Golden Abyss, Wipeout 2048, and Rayman Origins demonstrated that the PS Vita could actually deliver console-quality gaming on the go. Now yes, maybe it wasn't quite on the level of the PS3, but it was impressive, and the variety of the games were there too, from big-budget action games all the way to quirky indie titles. However, the elephant in the room was the price. At $249 for the Wi-Fi model and $299 for the 3G version, the Vita was positioning itself as a premium device. This was a risky move, especially considering that Nintendo had recently slashed the price of its 3DS handheld from $250 to $170 after a rocky start. Equally as problematic were the proprietary memory cards. If you wanted to download games or even save your progress on many titles, you needed one of Sony's expensive Vita memory cards. These ranged from $20 for a measly 4 GB to an eye-watering $120 for 32 gigs. It was a decision that would haunt the Vita throughout its lifespan, turning many potential buyers away. But as they say, never ever ever let Sony make proprietary media, because they're going to milk it and make you buy it, and it's going to be really expensive, and it's not going to be as good as like an SD card or literally anything else, because You know, I probably could have sent my children to college instead of buying all the PS Vita memory cards. That would have been a better idea. Actually, no, to be fair, it has been years, but we actually can finally buy those like micro SD adapters for the PS Vita memory cards. Highly recommend to get one of those, and don't buy one of the incredibly rare and expensive Vita memory cards in 2024. Despite these challenges, there was genuine excitement around the Vita's launch. Tech reviewers praised the device's gorgeous OLED screen, comfortable controls, and impressive horsepower. For gamers who had dreamed of console-quality gaming on the go, the Vita seemed to deliver on its promises. But as the weeks turned into months, cracks began to show in Sony's strategy. After the initial surge of launch sales, demand began to cool. By spring, the Vita was selling only around 12,000 units a week in Japan and 50,000 a month in North America, numbers that were concerning for a brand new system. The competition wasn't making things any easier. Nintendo's 3DS, after its price cut at least, had found its footing and was beginning to build momentum. Popular franchises like Mario Kart 7 and Super Mario 3D Land were driving sales, and the 3DS's lower price point made it an easier sell to parents and casual gamers. The biggest issue though was absolutely the rise of smartphone gaming. It simply was eating into the market for dedicated handhelds. Why carry a separate device when you can play games on the phone you already have in your pocket? So we'll say that playing the Vita even today is still a really nice experience, especially when it comes to games such as Tearaway. Now this was not a launch title, I don't think, but Tearaway is always the game I think about with the Vita that's most Vita-y. You know, it has all of the features that the Vita had. So you've got touch controls, you've also got the rear touch controls for certain parts. You also can just rotate around and take your own photos in the game. Like, Tearaway I think does a lot that was very much like, hey, let's show off what the Vita can do. It almost reminds me in some ways of Astro's Playroom, except that it was a paid $40 game. But it's lovely, and it looks really nice too. Oh, I need to touch, right? No, touch on the back. It's that fingerprint. What do I need to do? Oh, there we go. I had to push it over. Man, this just feels great because there's so many quality of life upgrades over the PSP. You've got yourself the dual analog sticks, which this game doesn't really take advantage of, but most games do. You've got that beautiful OLED touchscreen. You've got the fact that it actually feels nice. You've also got the little dimples on the back of the PS Vita, which feel nice. Like, yeah, could you make the argument that it's a little bit small for today? Yeah, but it doesn't really feel all that different than playing with your smartphone and a controller, right? Like, this is a very reasonable size, especially in a world where we're all playing on like Steam Decks or Legion Go's that are massive. This feels a lot more reasonable. Yeet. No, that's not it. Oh, I get it. Turns on the stairs. There we go. But the issue here was that even the Vita had a lot of issues with games. Not only did it not have an enormous selection, but on top of that, you gotta remember, this is back when games were mobile versions on handhelds such as the Vita, right? Like today, if you buy Hogwarts Legacy on the Switch, is it gonna look worse? Absolutely, but it's still the same game, right? But with this, unless you're playing a game such as Tearaway that was designed specifically for the Vita, games that were very few and far between, the vast majority of games that you would buy, whether it be a Call of Duty or a Madden or whatever, were definitely weaker versions of the games, and the ultimate thing that was a problem was that a lot of smartphones also got very similar versions of games. In fact, this was in the era where you could play stuff like Dead Space on your iPhone, which felt like it was the future, and the Vita, well, the Vita just couldn't. Or at least, it didn't. The early years of the PlayStation Vita were a roller coaster of highs and lows. On the software front, the Vita did keep up some momentum. 2012 saw the release of several high-profile titles that showcased what the Vita could do, including Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation, Little Big Planet, and probably most notably, Persona 4 Golden, which quickly became a system seller and remains one of the most beloved games in the Vita's library. However, not every big release hit the mark. Call of Duty Black Ops Declassified, a game that many hoped would drive adoption among hardcore gamers, landed with, well, at least it wasn't Modern Warfare 3 on the DS. With a Metacritic score of just 33%, Declassified became one of the worst reviewed games in the franchise's history. Despite some signs of life, hardware sales were really starting to ring alarm bells now. By the end of 2012, Sony reported that the Vita had only sold 4 million units worldwide. This number paled in comparison to the Nintendo 3DS, which had sold over 17 million units in roughly the same time frame. Even more worryingly, this would be the last time that Sony publicly disclosed Vita sales figures, a move that many interpreted as an attempt to save face. In early 2013, the company announced the first price cut for the handheld, dropping it from $250 to $200. This was a necessary move to stay competitive, but it also ate into Sony's already questionable profit margins. 2013 also saw the launch of the PlayStation 4. The ability to use the Vita as a second screen for the PS4, or to stream PS4 games to the handheld, a feature you might be familiar with called Remote Play, gave the Vita a new lease on life for some gamers. This wasn't exactly a new concept, mind you. The PSP did have some limited remote play capabilities, but the implementation on the PS4 was a lot more usable. Yet even as Sony tried to find new ways to make the Vita relevant, they faced a growing problem. Third-party developers were beginning to abandon the platform. The install base just simply wasn't large enough to justify the investment for many AAA games, when developers could instead target the 3DS or in most cases, the truly enormous iPhone and Android ecosystems. Worse still, even Sony began to lose focus on the Vita, with the brand new shiny PS4 tearing up the sales charts. The actual support for first-party titles on the Vita was winding down just about as quickly as the Vita had even gotten started. In response to this challenge, Sony made a strategic pivot. Rather than continuing to chase after big-budget titles, they began to court indie developers. Sony even waived developer fees, making it easier than ever for small teams to publish on the platform. This indie-friendly approach really led to what many would consider to be a renaissance for the Vita. Games like Hotline Miami, Spelunky, and Fez found a perfect home on the handheld. The Vita began to carve out a niche as the ultimate indie game machine, appealing to players who wanted unique and innovative experiences on the go. As the Vita struggled to gain traction in the market, Sony pulled out their tried and true playbook: bring out a slim model that removes a bunch of features that people actually care about. The most noticeable change was in the form factor itself. True to its slim name, it was about 20% thinner and about 15% lighter. However, the most controversial change came with the display. Sony replaced the original OLED screen with an LCD panel. Now, while this was primarily a cost-cutting measure, and I absolutely preferred the OLED to the LCD, it was at least a pretty decent screen. The LCD offered accurate color reproduction and better visibility in bright light, although it of course lacked the OLED's excellent contrast ratio. Battery life also saw an improvement in the slim model. Through a combination of the more efficient LCD screen, refined internal components, and a slightly larger battery, users could expect around an extra hour of gameplay compared to the original model. Another notable inclusion was 1 GB of internal storage. Now, that might seem paltry by today's standards. It was a significant improvement over the original model, which had no built-in storage at all. This meant that users could save game data and even download some very small games without having to purchase a separate memory card, at least right away. Speaking of memory cards, Sony also made some adjustments in this area. The proprietary Vita memory cards, which had been a small point of contention, mostly due to the fact that they cost roughly as much as snake venom, liquid gold, or printer ink, they finally saw some price reductions. The 4 GB card dropped by about $5, while the larger capacity cards saw discounts of $15 to $20. Better than nothing, I guess? Although it was not better than the SD or micro SD that the 3DS used, which was, cheap. In addition to the slim model, Sony introduced another piece of hardware, the PlayStation TV. Now, this wasn't a handheld device. Instead, it basically dropped the Vita motherboard in a small set-top box that paired to an included DualShock 3, so you could play most Vita games on a TV. Now, priced at a relatively affordable $100, it was an interesting concept, but it did struggle to find its audience. It launched to modest sales in Japan, with only around 42,000 units sold in its debut week. Global sales figures were never officially released, but estimates suggest that it probably didn't even reach 1 million units sold worldwide. I remember there was a time where these things were on sale all day long for $40, maybe $50, until the stock finally dried up years later. And as soon as the stock dried up, they shot up, and now they're worth like, I don't know, $150, $200? It was a neat idea, but I think the time for microconsoles has sadly come and gone. The PlayStation Vita's journey may have been less than smooth, but its impact on the gaming industry is undeniable, and there's real argument that it was the right console, just at the wrong time. By 2018, which is also wild to think about that they still made the Vita 2 years into the lifespan of the Switch, Sony had officially discontinued the Vita, with final sales estimates hovering around 15 to 16 million units. To put that in perspective, it's roughly on par with the Wii U, and by far the worst selling PlayStation console ever, even to this day. Certainly not the numbers that Sony had hoped for when they set out to replace the PSP. And yet, sales figures, they only tell part of the story. As usual, PlayStation's questionable marketing practices did not help matters. They were sued for misleading ads. Early PS Vita ads heavily pushed the system's remote play, cross-platform, and cross-save features, which, while great in theory, were very limited in practice, available on only a handful of games, and some even required you to buy 2 copies of the same game, the PS3 version as well as the Vita version. Their sexist ads definitely didn't help either.
You can keep going all day long. Don't you like that?
I'm not even gonna make you watch all of them. I hadn't even seen some of these until we started doing the research for this video, and yikes. I don't know what is wrong with the Sony marketing teams, but they were on one for a couple decades there. questionable ads aside, the Vita definitely did find a dedicated niche, especially in Japan, where they continued to use the system long after most gamers had moved on. It became the go-to platform for JRPGs and visual novels, titles that might not have found a home elsewhere. Perhaps even more significant is the Vita's impact on the modding and homebrew community. Long after official support ended, enthusiasts have continued to push the boundaries of what the system can do. For years, it was considered one of the best ways to emulate classic games, thanks to its vibrant OLED screen and actually good controls. The Vita's influence can be felt even today. The Nintendo Switch really was the spiritual successor, with its focus on both big budget and indie titles. It's clear that Nintendo learned from both the successes and the failures of the Vita. Now, I firmly believe that the PS Vita was everything that gamers could have hoped for from a PSP 2. It doesn't take a great amount of imagination to draw a line directly from the last portable PlayStation to devices of today like the Steam Deck. In many ways, the Vita was a handheld ahead of its time, pushing boundaries that the market just wasn't quite ready for. Looking toward the future, it does seem like the time is perfect for Sony to bring out a properly next-generation portable console. Between the bizarre success of the PlayStation Portal, the enormous sales figures of the Switch, and the quickly growing PC handheld space, you can't tell me that a portable PS6 wouldn't absolutely crush it. But I guess I've been wrong before. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed, please consider subscribing and feel free to check out other episodes in this series, which we are making on every single generation of PlayStation. Now, if you excuse me, I'm gonna start prepping for the final episode. It's about to be PlayStation 4 time, my friends.